Te reo ererangi o te mānia. This episode was produced in Otatahi by Plains Media, with support from New Zealand On Air.
You've heard the dragons roar. Now it's time to hear the ocean's answer. Welcome back to Avis's next adventure, the continuation of Avis and the Promise of Dragons. I'm Audrey Worsley, your guide into the deep. This is Avis and the Call of the Kraken by Heather McQuillan, published by Ahoy, an imprint of the Cuba press in 2024. Ready? Hold your breath. The sea is waking. Avis had answered 3 of the mental maths challenge questions when the vibrations started at the top of her ribcage. Her pencil still gripped in her left hand, she gently squeezed the small satin bag around her neck with the other. She felt the vibrations double. She put down her pencil case and raised her hand. "Yes, Avis," said Mr. Hawke. "I'm not feeling well." "Do you think it's something you've eaten?" he asked, briskly urging her through the classroom door. "Maybe," said Avis, and headed to the sick bay. "It could be appendicitis," said Sandra, the lovely receptionist. "Wouldn't the pain be lower down?" said Carol, the not-so-lovely lady. Avis groaned and slipped one hand lower where she thought the appendix might be. She mustered up a sickly voice. "There's no point in phoning Dad. He's in Australia. I'm staying with my emergency contact, Dr. Melinda Child." Avis lay on the sick bay bed and groaned again. The satin bag quivered and she pulled the blanket to her chin to cover it. She heard Sandra's voice explaining the situation and then a long pause. "She wants to talk to you," Sandra said, handing Avis the phone. "Are you really in pain?" asked Melinda, "or is Humbert being a spoiled baby?" "It feels urgent," said Avis. "Honey, I can see him right now. Nothing hurt but his pride," Melinda said. "Are you sure? I think I need to come home and talk to him." "I reckon he's fine, but if you need to see for yourself, I can come get you." "Yes, please." It only took a few minutes for her to arrive in her white van and sign Avis out. Melinda was brisk with the office ladies and even looked a bit stern, with her greying hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. But Avis saw the glint in her eye and meant she was amused. "Get better soon, Avis," said lovely Sandra. "She still doesn't look sick to me," said not-so-lovely Carol, loud enough for Avis to hear. Bit of an attention seeker, that one, like her mother. Heat rose in Avis's cheeks. As she was putting on her seatbelt, the dragon's tear in its satin bag trembled in a whole new way. Avis was shocked to realize she could hear Humbert's dragonish thoughts from far away. Avis hoped he could hear her too. She gripped the bag and thought hard. "No, Humbert, you can't eat her." "You can't respond to every attention-seeking grumble from Humbert," Melinda said, starting the van. "You need to be in school. I promised your father." "Humbert knows that. It must be serious." It occurred to Avis that looking after a demanding dragon would be more of a challenge now that he was using the tear to communicate his thoughts from a distance. It had been hard enough with just his feelings. She opened the little blue bag around her neck and took out the dragon's tear. Its crystal surface was smooth, but the interior shuddered with zigzags of blue and red. "He's really unhappy and angry," she said. "You don't understand him." "Better than you know," said Melinda, and her eyes crinkled and twinkled in the way they did when she learned new and curious things about dragons. Avis hopped out of the van to open the heavy green gates that were always kept padlocked. No visitors were welcome or safe at the house on the corner of Menagerie Street. Melinda drove ahead to the carport while Avis snapped the padlock closed. She clutched the dragon's tear in her hand. "I'm home," she thought. "And I'm here, but you still have to find me." Avis hurried to the cave under the fat-budded rhododendron bushes where Humbert liked to sit, beneath the branches, but he wasn't there. Hide-and-seek was one of his favourite games, and he was getting good at it. Avis checked for the hint of shimmering that would give away his camouflaged form, but he wasn't by the old house, or in the tunnel house, or anywhere in the front garden. She walked to the large back lawn with its dragon poo pile and scorched fire testing site. The glossy spring grass was covered in dandelions, except for one dragon-shaped patch. She tiptoed closer. "Found you," she whispered. Humbert stretched and shimmered as his scales turned from camouflage hues to his natural colouring. Then his bronze wings tucked into his body and his coppery head hung low. "Finally you're here," the dragon hummed. "What was so important that I had to leave school?" "They laughed at me," he whined. "They shouldn't have laughed at me. And," a rumble came from his throat, "they wouldn't let me have any chocolate." "Shh," said Avis. "Remember your backyard voice. The neighbours might hear you." The bony ridges on Humbert's forehead pulled down into a scowl. "I'm not a pet. I'm a wild and independent dragon." "I know." Avis rested her hand on his scaly haunch. "You just need to be a quiet one. Maybe we should mind talk more. We're getting better at it. I heard you loud and clear at school." "It makes me tired," mumbled Humbert, "but at least I'm getting better at something." "Is he telling you we laughed at him?" asked Melinda, striding towards them. "We said sorry, but it was funny." "It wasn't funny, and I hurt myself." Humbert blew a puff of hot air. "You mustn't laugh at him," said Avis. "He's sensitive." "He was doing a somersault when his wings got tangled and he crash-landed with his legs in the air. We laughed without thinking," said Melinda, smothering a smile. Then there was a snort from the other side of the rhododendron patch, and a scaly red snout appeared. Avis wished she could hear what the other dragon was saying. "Did not," said Humbert to Princess. "I missed the poo pile by miles." Princess preened a single patch on her crimson wing and wandered off. "I'm never going to somersault again," grumped Humbert. Avis leaned into Humbert's bronze-tipped ear. "Humbert, nobody, not even the cleverest dragon in the world, gets it right on the first time." "It wasn't my first time, it was my 23rd. I've been practicing and practicing. I really wanted to surprise you." "I can't wait to see it then. I bet you're really close to nailing it." Humbert nuzzled his long snout into Avis's shoulders. His wide nostrils were warm and damp. "See, I did need you." Avis patted his scaly neck. "You'll have to learn to stick up for yourself better. I can't come running every time your feelings get hurt. School is important." "More important than me?" His eyes glinted. "Different important," said Avis. "I need to go to school." "What you need right now," said Humbert, straightening himself up to his full size, which was taller and wider and longer than a horse, "is some up, and away time." Avis grinned. "That's just what I need." "I like it when we need the same thing." Humbert hummed a happy hum. Avis agreed. It was hard when their needs were at odds, like when Humbert needed to be noisy and she needed quiet, or when Humbert needed adventure and she needed safety, or when Humbert wanted to eat people like Drake Snelling and she kind of wished he could too, but knew he couldn't because it was the wrong thing to do. "We'd like to go flying, is that okay?" Avis asked Melinda. "I figured that's what you were talking about," said Melinda. "Humbert, I think your theory is proving itself a fact." She winked at him. "What?" demanded Avis. "What aren't you telling me?" Humbert smiled, a secret sort of dragonish smile. Melinda ignored her question. "I think the fresh air will do you both some good. I wouldn't mind some for myself." She pulled her own dragon tear from her pocket. The crystal quivered with a sort of anxious purple. Princess was unhappy. "It's okay, I'll stay with you," said Melinda, walking over to Princess. "I promise I'd never abandon you, and I meant it. We'll go flying as soon as your wing is healed. In the meantime, I'm keen to write up your progress in fire proficiency. Not that any reputable scientific journal would publish it. Who's going to endorse a paper entitled Risk Management Considerations when experimenting with the combination of cacao and chili, the metabolic systems of a Teju chocolate dragon?" Avis was glad Humbert had already mastered fire breathing, and she didn't need to tend to his wounds anymore. He'd been a terrible patient. "Maybe one day," said Melinda, as she stroked Princess's neck. "We have to keep you secret, for now." Avis looked up sharply. "What do you mean for now? We can never tell anyone about Humbert and Princess." The only one she'd actually told was her brother Bruno. Her dad had found out by mistake, and then there was... "I'm sussing out a plan," said Melinda, stroking her bonded mate's shiny red snout. "We both know they can't stay here forever. The Teju Chokor needs some space to move and make noise, in a sanctuary far away from prying eyes. To arrange all that, we're going to need help. And to get help, we'll have to figure out who we can trust. But until then, yes, it's only me, your dad, and Bruno who know anything about them." "And Drake Snelling," said Avis. "I thought Bruno convinced him it was a delusion," said Melinda, frowning. "He knows he wasn't hallucinating. He only promised not to tell anyone because he was scared of Bruno. But when Drake finds out my brother has moved to Australia with Mum, I could scare him again. Humbert reared up and bared his sharp teeth. That would only prove your existence, Avis said. Humbert rolled his amber eyes. Well, that's a dilemma. Let's try to think of a better plan while we're up and away. That's where I do my best thinking anyways. Humbert's scales took on the fresh greens and woody browns of the rhododendron grove. He'd been perfecting his camouflage over 8 months since he had hatched. The only thing that had interfered with this ability was the effect of chocolate on his metabolism. Fortunately, he hadn't eaten any for weeks. When he was camouflaged, only a faint outline of a Teju choco dragon, his long snout, horned head, ridged back, curling tail, and glorious wings was visible. And only the most imaginative observer. Anyone else would just see a haze, like shimmering heat. Avis raced into the house to grab her flying jacket, goggles, and woolly hat, because she didn't know how long they'd be, and quickly visited the loo. She reminded Humbert to do the same, for the sake of anyone they happened to fly over. Once in position on her dragon's back, Avis adjusted her flying goggles. The coppery scales across Humbert's shoulder blades swiveled. On the underside of each scale, there were tiny hooks that clung to Avis' track pants like Velcro. They held her so firmly she didn't need to grip with her knees or even hold on to Humbert's neck ridge. Up, up and away, said Avis softly, as Humbert lifted them up from the ground. Above the rooftops, Avis raised her head and arms and felt the air rushing between her outspread fingers. If she could fly on a dragon all day, far away from the worries of home and school, she was sure she would be happy forever. Humbert took their favourite route south along the rocky coastline. The only people that ever saw him were the adventurous types out hiking or kayaking or fishing. They must have assumed shimmering shape in the sky was dehydration hallucination, because there was never any waving or pointing. Avis sighed. Humbert's breath streamed out of his nostrils, leaving twin jet trails in the cool spring air. She wished her brother was still here. She didn't have anyone else to talk about with these things. Who else could she trust? Even Melinda seemed to be keeping things from her. Avis thought about the look on their father's face when Bruno announced that he was going to Australia to live with their mum and her soon-to-be husband and their soon-to-be new baby. And you, Avis, her dad had said, do you want to go live with your mum too? Avis said no straight away. She didn't even want to visit them because she had so many responsibilities at home. Theo, the dog she was pet-sitting, and 2 dragons to look after. Plus she felt responsible for her father, even though he was doing so much better. I'm not coming, Avis said to Bruno. That's my decision. For me, Bruno replied. I need a fresh start. But I don't want you to leave. She understood why he was going, though. He'd been miserable at school, and even though he'd been helpful when the dragons were babies, they weren't his dragons. He hadn't promised to look after them. I'm not leaving forever. I'll be back for the holidays, or you can visit me and we can FaceTime every week. I know it will be hard, but I think it's the right decision. Bruno put his arm around her and pulled her in for a bear hug. Avis felt tears prickling. It's a terrible decision, even if it's the right one. Their dad agreed. It's a terrible decision and a brave one, and I'm sorry you ever had to make it. Bruno, I have one condition, though. I want to come over with you to check the school out. That way I can bring you back if you change your mind. And that's why Avis was staying with Melinda for the week. Humbert tilted his wings to bank over the ocean. Avis gripped his neck ridge to steady herself. Below them, the sea shifted between different shades of blue as they flew further out. Avis spotted something dark and raised over the horizon. What's that? She asked. Let's find out. Humbert beat his magnificent wings in a sudden lift. Avis instinctively grabbed hold again, though his Velcro-like scales gripped her legs and kept her safe, just as she needed. The black shape grew in the horizon and kept moving further away. After some time, Humbert's wing beats began to labour under the effort. Maybe we should turn back, Avis said, twisting her head to see the coast, a smudged line of charcoal in the distance behind them. The only other land they'd seen on their flight was a small green island with a jutting peninsula that was now nothing but a dot to the south. Nearly there, Humbert gave an extra thrust to his tiring wings. He banked to the right so that Avis could better see the object they were flying towards. It was a series of block shapes lifted above the waves. The low sun glinted on it, reflecting the colour yellow. A tall crane-like tower rose from the middle platform. It's a drilling rig, shouted Avis. Is that good or bad? Hummed Humbert. Avis collected her thoughts to show Humbert. It depends on how you look at it. Good if you want fuel to run your car, or gas to heat your house. And bad? Bad if gas or oil gets into the ocean. We did a study on it at school, but I thought there was no drilling allowed off our coast. A thought came to her. It could be illegal, and that's bad. Very. Probably. Maybe. Once Avis had been certain about these things, but since meeting Melinda and her illegal lizards, she had felt less sure about what was definitely right and what was definitely wrong. We should be getting home. The shore looked very far away. Avis felt a squirminess in her tummy that she had come to recognize as a worry tummy. But Humbert wasn't ready to go back. He wanted a closer look at the thing that could be good or bad, depending on how you looked at it. He wanted to look at it in different ways. That's not what I meant, said Avis, but he banked again and flew closer. People in yellow and red jackets were moving about the platform, going about their work. Then one of them pointed at the shimmering shape in the sky. There were shouts and running. Phones were held aloft to capture the phenomena. We have to go, now, insisted Avis, digging her heels into Humbert's side. Thrum. The dragon's tear around her neck trembled. Humbert, are you all right? That's not me. Humbert's muscle tensed as he swooped upwards. It's something else. Look. Beyond the drilling rig, where the ocean changed from blue to deep green, Avis saw the water's surface shudder. Ripples were spreading with a pulse that matched the vibrations in her chest. Thrum. The swell rocked the drill rig platform. The people scattered and disappeared down hatches. The vibrations stopped. Was that a whale? Avis cast about for an answer, as if an explanation would settle the trembling in her guts. Or an underground explosion? A deep-sea earthquake? No idea. Let's go back. I've never flown out this far, and my wings are tired. One summer at the beach, Avis had tried to swim out to a buoy and realized halfway she didn't have the energy to either get back to the shore or continue to the buoy. She began to panic when Bruno had swum out to rescue her. I thought it was closer, she had said, shivering on the shore. That's the thing with water. It can be deceptive, her mum had said, rubbing down her trembling arms with a towel. Distances are different over water. Avis gazed now at the line of land that didn't seem to be coming any closer. Behind them the sun sank lower, the sky was a golden pink, and the water reflected rosy patches of light. A terrible thought came to her. We're not going to make it. It's too far. At the same moment that the fear sank like a stone in her belly, Humbert dropped like a stone towards the ocean. He beat harder with his wings. Sorry, I lost my strength all of a sudden. It was my fault, said Avis. I'm scared. Me too. I don't know if dragons can swim. There's nothing in my ancestral memories about swimming. Avis' chest tightened, but she knew she couldn't panic now. It would amplify Humbert's fear, and she needed Humbert to get back safely to land. She recalled how Bruno had helped her and how he'd calmed her, so they could swim back to shore together. You can do it, she encouraged. Just one wing beat, and another. Bruno had said arm stroke, but she figured it was the same thing. The land on the horizon began to take shape. Hills and lowlands. The sun glanced off the windows and the hilltops, as if they were lights guiding them back. Humbert looked down, and his wings faltered in their beating. I'm certain dragons can't swim, his hum wobbled. Well, let's not find out, said Avis. Dragons can fly, so just keep flying. My wings ache. I never should have flown out so far. We should have tried to land on that island we passed, but now it's too late, and I've put you in danger and broken my promise to do what you need. A wet, salty tear was caught by the breeze and splashed back into Avis's face. Humbert, she spluttered, I need you to keep flying. I know you can do it. Weariness slowed his wings. They sank lower. The white caps glistened and flapped like white sheets on the washing line. You can do it. There was no reply. Humbert, keep going. They sank again. Now the beach was in sight. And up ahead, the surf lifted and rolled onto the sand. A flock of curious gulls wheeled around them, unhinged their beaks, and squawking a warning. Humbert lurched as if his motor had stalled. Avis gripped tighter. I believe in you, she said. It was what Bruno had said just before she had felt the sand beneath her feet and staggered towards her mother's waiting arms. But, Humbert's belly skimmed the water, but I don't believe in myself. And with that, he lost the last of his energy and his wings stopped beating. Forward momentum kept them gliding, and behind them a wave was forming. Pull in your wings and paddle, Avis yelled. Humbert's scaly legs paddled frantically. The wave lifted them. Now stop paddling. Avis sent her boogie boarding memories into Humbert's mind. Humbert reached his front legs forward and tucked his back legs close to his side. His belly scales were drawn together to create a smooth, waterproof surface. Then the wave was beneath them, carrying them along ahead of its breaking edge. "Angle your body," yelled Avis. Humbert leaned to the left and they barreled along the curling wave's edge and floated gently to shore. He adjusted his scales of sand and waded up onto the beach, looking pleased. "Dragons may not be able to swim," he rumbled with pride, "but they can surf." Since they'd been studying dragons together, Avis had seen Melinda annoyed plenty of times. Annoyed at her computer, annoyed when she'd come back from a disappointing meeting, but Avis had never before been on the receiving end of her sharp tone and fierce eyes. "What would I have told your father if you'd gone out and drowned? How did you go so far out?" "It's all my fault," said Humbert at once. "Don't be mad at Avis. She told me to head back, and I didn't listen. I got carried away." Avis was about to relay Humbert's speech when Melinda stepped closer to Humbert and replied immediately, "I'm angry at both of you." "Wait," said Avis. "How did you understand what he said?" Melinda's annoyance vanished instantly, and her eyes began to twinkle again. She tapped the pocket where she kept the dragon tear Princess had given her. "We've been experimenting with frequencies, and if Humbert transmits at wider levels, then..." Knowing Melinda was likely to get into a long scientific explanation of the experiments they'd been doing while Avis was at school, Humbert interrupted. "I learned a lot today. Avis told me how things aren't always the way they look at first, especially over water. I didn't know that before." Avis grinned. She hadn't actually explained any of that. Humbert had picked up the story about her swimming out to the buoy and figured it out himself. He was learning so much so quickly, like somersaulting and how to communicate and how to surf. Although she was proud of Humbert, his progress also made her a little sad. When he'd been younger, he'd needed Avis to help him understand things, because she'd been the only one he could talk to. Now he had Melinda too. What if he didn't need her anymore? She leaned into Humbert's front leg. He humped gently and reminded her of their promise, to always do what each other needed. If she needed to feel needed, he would explain in his dragon hum only to her that he needed her. "What made you go out so far in the first place, hon?" asked Melinda later when they were preparing dinner. "We spotted a drilling rig and wanted a closer look. It's got to be there illegally, right?" Ava said. "We should tell the authorities." "They already know." Melinda toasted some seeds in a pan to add to the salad. "But isn't there a law that said no drilling offshore? I read about it somewhere." "That's true," said Melinda. "But when they brought in the law, there had been several outstanding contracts that had been granted by the previous government and they couldn't cancel them." "Why not?" Ava said, removing 2 large baked potatoes from the oven and split them open, letting the steam rise. "Because they'd be breaking a promise." "Even though they hadn't made it?" "Yes, honey, that's the law." "So that drilling rig isn't illegal?" "I don't think so." "Well, it should be," said Avis. "What if there's an accident?" "And what if it finds nothing, wastes a lot of drilling company money, and then moves somewhere else?" said Melinda. "I thought you'd be against it," said Avis, looking at the woman who knew so much about so many things but still made dreadful mistakes, like trusting an 11-year-old with a tunnel house full of endangered lizards and 2 Tejuchoka eggs. "Oh, I am," said Melinda. "Deep-sea drilling causes dreadful damage to the ocean environments. Not only when oil or gas leaks, they can cause undersea earthquakes, and some research suggests the sounds they can produce interfere with deep-sea creatures' navigation systems." "We saw something rippling in the water," said Avis. "It made a wave that rocked the rig. I thought it might be a whale, but what if it was an undersea earthquake?" "Crikey," said Melinda, and she had that look in her eye again, that sort of twinkly, eager around the edges. "I'll chat with some friends online, see what they can find out." They carried their dinner outside to the picnic table under the intertwined branches of the rhododendrons so the humans and dragons could eat together. Melinda wanted to make an announcement. "I think I've found the perfect home for the lizards," she said, "and," she looked at Humbert and Princess, "it might be perfect for the 2 of you as well." Avis hadn't seen Melinda's collection of illegally imported lizards since she had rescued them from the storm and hidden them from the police. That was the same week she hatched 2 baby dragons, so she hadn't given the lizard much thought since then. She knew they had been semi-hibernating during the colder months on Melinda's friend's farm. Now that it was spring, they needed space to move and somewhere to make their nest. The remains of their old tunnel house at Melinda's was currently occupied by 2 large dragons. Melinda opened a tab on her phone to a real estate listing. The headline said, "Island Paradise for sale." "Did you see it? You must have been close," she said to Avis and Humbert. "The ad says the island's peninsula has been properly fenced to be predator-free. Could be a great place for the lizards, but the main part of the island has plenty of predators, such as cats and stoats and ferrets. I think they might be the perfect home for Teju Choka. They can't live in Mash forever. There's a hut for me and a small harbour. The only way to get there is by boat. Or by dragon, added Humbert. Well, the real estate agent said there aren't any clear sites for landing small planes or helicopters. I didn't ask about dragons. Melinda reached out to stroke Princess's glimmering crimson scales. But we could clear a strip for you two to land on. I can surf, hummed Humbert proudly, as if this was a discovery that hadn't been a lucky accident. The scales along Humbert's flank twinkled in the fairy lights that Melinda had strung around the rhododendrons, and it seemed as if he was aflame, with tiny coppery fires. Avis loved it when he was fully visible and in his natural colouring. His neck was thick and smooth, his snout long, and his nostrils flared with each breath, showing their soft pink insides. Avis looked at him right in his amber eye. Yes, you are an amazing surfer, she said, and it's what he needed her to say. Ignoring Humbert's bragging, Melinda continued. I've been asking around to see if anyone has a boat to take Avis and me over there, so we can see if it's suitable. Humbert whined. No, Humbert, it's too risky to fly until we know there's somewhere you can land and take off safely. But if the island looks good, I'll sell this place and buy it. She waved her hand at the wild garden and the house with peeling paint. Melinda had grown up there. Avis wondered how much the whole island would cost. Her dad had told her that a property like Melinda's would be worth millions. It certainly wasn't the house that was worth millions, Avis thought as she cleared the dishes from the picnic table and carried them into the kitchen with its uneven floorboards and green-painted cupboards and antiquated coal range. The old house would probably get knocked down for apartments. The water pipes groaned and gurgled when she turned on the taps over the sink. As she swirled the detergent in, her thoughts swirled too. Avis knew Humbert and Princess couldn't stay forever in the garden on the corner of Menagerie Street, but she'd been hoping they would. First her mother had left, then Bruno. Now she would lose Humbert and Princess and Melinda, too, if they all moved to the island. Before she realised it, the dishes were done, and her thoughts were still swirling as she pulled away the plug. She wished that her worries would drain away so easily. When Avis stepped onto the wooden veranda, her chocolate Labrador Theo, who had been waiting for her on an old blanket, sat up and waggled his whole back end. She scratched behind his ears. His warm, doggy breath engulfed her face. You'll stay with me, won't you, boy? She whispered. Then she remembered she was only pet-sitting Theo. At any time, Mira could stop being a personal assistant to her stepdad in Australia and want her dog back. Nothing was permanent. I'm going to take Theo for a WALK, she called. It was pointless spelling the word out. Theo knew exactly what she meant and began waggling his entire body and leaping around in a circle at the same time. He fell off the veranda and just kept going. Okay, said Melinda, just a short one. It's getting late and you need to go to school tomorrow, no matter what Humbert thinks. That's the law. One of the things Avis had quickly become acquainted with about pet-sitting is it wasn't all happy games and big eyes looking at you lovingly. There was also poo. Theo was delighted to get out and around the neighbourhood, to take in all the smells and leave some of his own. Avis diligently scooped his poop up into a bag. She didn't want to have to carry the stinky bag all the way home, so she looked for somewhere to get rid of it. There were a couple of red bins at the edge of the alleyway by Papalou's dairy. She lifted a lid and dropped the pile onto a sticky ice cream wrapper and a pile of plastic wrap. Theo tugged his leash from her grasp and followed a new trail of smells along the alleyway. Avis jogged to catch up with him. At the end of the alleyway behind the shops was a gravel car park. There she found a battered metal rubbish skip, and in the far corner, covered by a blue plastic tarpaulin, was the unmistakable shape of a boat on a trailer. And that wraps up today's tale on Spin Me a Tale. But don't wander too far. Join me next Saturday at 9:30 a.m. on Plains Media, broadcasting on 96.9 FM for the next episode in our journey. If you want to relive the magic, all past episodes are waiting at plains.org.nz. Let your imagination stay wide awake.